This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today it's Wednesday. It's January 10th, 2024. Thank you for joining us here on thetruthcentral.com. You can follow me on Twitter at CorsiJerome1, at CorsiJerome1. Doing a lot more on Twitter, and we have posted a Substack now at JeromeCorsiPhD.substack.com. Please check us out. We're, as I said, I'm no longer retired. I'm getting much more active again, posting and reporting. And I think it's going to be a really important and eventful year, 2024, given an election year and all the things going on in the world, which is appears to be at best chaos these days. At any rate, let's take a look at the news stories today. First story I want to cover is that the fighting in the Gaza is intensifying. And it's not slowing down at all. In fact, the IDF forces, IDF being the Israeli Defense Forces, are fighting in various of the refugee camps now, where they found a series of arms factories, including factories manufacturing long-range rockets. The refugee camps were also used to link to a branching network of tunnels that were used to transport. Hamas used these tunnels to transport weapons throughout the Gaza Strip. So this refugee camp, especially this one large one, the Bureji, B-U-R-E-J-I, or B-U-R-E-I-J, that's the name of the camp, in central Gaza, was one of the ones that was specifically in which they found arms factories, including manufacturing long-range rockets. And yesterday there were at least 2 rocket attacks from the Gaza on Israel. So Hamas is not finished fighting yet. Senior Hamas figures, of course, are criticizing Israeli defense minister's comments about the IDF entry into the third phase of comments. But Israel seems determined. Israel is not going to stop until it really does drive a huge blow to Hamas, which is a terrorist organization funded by Iran that aims to destroy Israel. Now, there was a very interesting story that was emerging yesterday about Netanyahu in a conversation with the UAE, United Arab Emirates, that the UAE president, who is Mohammed bin Zayed, refused a request by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to pay unemployment stipends to the Palestinian workers. See, about 150,000 Palestinians who work in Israel have been blocked from entering Israel since the war started. Now, that's about 3 months. And they're suffering, of course, because they don't have any employment. And Israel does not want to pay them. They don't want to pay unemployment benefits. They were asking the UAE to pay the benefits. And what the president of the UAE, United Arab Emirates, told Netanyahu was, go ask Zelenskyy in Ukraine. He's got all the money. Now, I think that's pretty funny, actually. It's kind of sarcastically kind of funny. I mean, look, the billions of dollars that have been given Ukraine have largely been unaccounted for. And so you've got corruption in Ukraine, which is probably the most massive in the world, biggest money laundering operation going. And it ties right back to the Biden White House, because, of course, Biden, as vice president under Obama, was heavily involved with Burisma, which is the natural gas company where Hunter Biden was on the board, and the Bidens were making a ton of money. Now, again, none of this is being seriously investigated by the Department of Justice, because the Department of Justice doesn't care what the Democrats do. The Democrats can murder, rape, steal, pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein's island. They can do all this stuff. Clinton's, nobody touches them. Clinton Foundation, complete fraud. I wrote a book on it called Partners in Crime a few years ago. Nobody did a thing. But yet Trump has got 150,000 prosecutions because of he supported the insurrection. They say this is insane. Okay, now the whole reason that Netanyahu is talking to the UAE president is because the Gaza Strip is just completely. Also, by the way, also the ban is on the West Bank too. The West Bank is closed. The Gaza Strip is closed. So there's 150,000 Palestinian workers are no longer entering Israel. Israel's just blocked it. Okay, and so the Palestinian economy in the UAE and the Gaza is, of course, tanked. The Gaza is being destroyed with the war because the Israeli Defense Force is going building by building. A lot of missile attacks, a lot of drone attacks. So it's getting to look like Beirut looked like in the 1970s. In other words, the Gaza Strip is basically going to look like Ukraine. Also, we're destroying these cities and countries, and the Gaza Strip is going to be another disaster in that a functioning entity, the Gaza, which had buildings and the Gaza Strip was not ever like Israel is. Israel today is a modern state and it works very efficiently. The Gaza Strip, the money's all been stolen out of the Gaza Strip going back to Yasser Arafat. And so you've got massive corruption throughout the world. And the idea was that of course, our genius Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, is traveling around the Middle East right now. He visited Netanyahu yesterday and said, we can settle all this if you'll just have a path for a Palestinian state to be created. Now, I've heard this for 50 years, and it's not going to happen because a Palestinian state, given Hamas, given Iran is the real center of problem here, because as long as Iran is determined to kill Jews and destroy Israel, they don't want a Jewish state in the Middle East. As long as that attitude is there is no resolution. A Palestinian state would merely be looked at by the Iranians as a transition to destroying Israel. One more concession by Israel that made Israel weaker, creating a Palestinian state. Instead, what Israel's doing is they're destroying Hamas. So the idea of the United Nations and the idea of the Biden administration was that Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, others would step in and rebuild Gaza to make it a Palestinian state, and they would pay for it. But Netanyahu and the Israelis are not going to have it. So right now, the war is continuing. It's determined to continue. It's going to go on for months because cleaning out this tunnel system and destroying Hamas, which I believe after the horrific nature of the October 7th attack from Hamas coming in these, flying chairs and brutally raping, burning alive, beheading, torturing the Israelis whom they killed. The Israelis were largely defenseless because, again, the left in Israel trying to promote a Palestinian state, trying to take away weapons from the people, have left it completely disarmed, or not completely, but by and large, the people who were attacked on October 7th were not armed and could not fight back. So the disaster here is that we have chaos going on with Gaza, which is an expanding war. Hezbollah in Lebanon, you've got Syria has been attacking also Israel. And from all sides, Israel has enemies between Hezbollah and Hamas, funded by Iran, and Yemen with its rebels now in the Red Sea, having to divert sea trade, cargo ships. Maersk announced this week that it's not going to go through the Red Sea, and the Suez Canal is going to go around the Cape of Africa in order to get to India and China from Europe. So this is a complete disruption going on, and it has no immediate solution. October 7th is a game-changing event. It's like a paradigm shift. It's like the 9/11 attack here in the United States. Things were different the day the 9/11 attack occurred. It was so shocking. It was so jarring. It was one of those few days in history. Kennedy assassination was another, where everything changed. And the perceptions changed. Well, right now we're going into a world that is bent on destruction because we've got this evil neo-Marxism and cultural Maoism in ascendancy. Okay, I'm going to cover one more story. I'm going to ask Chris to comment because I think we're seeing the economic destruction that's going on worldwide, and Germany's already entering a recession. Germany's de-industrializing, which is remarkable to me. Well, the office vacancies are now hitting an all-time high. And this is pretty shocking because you have something like 19.6% of office space across the major U.S. metro areas are not leased as of the fourth quarter in 2023. This exceeds the previous high of 19.3% commercial real estate vacancies in the downtown areas of major cities between 1986 and 1991. Okay, now that was the period of time which we were just recovering from the double-digit inflation that followed the Carter presidency. And again, the Democrats have no ability here to do anything but spend money, print cash, which we don't have. We now have a $34 trillion national debt going rapidly to $35 trillion on an accelerating pace. Now, this office space rental problem is especially hitting office buildings that were built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. The buildings that are being occupied are the new buildings that are going up. And the changes here in the cities that are affected are democratic cities. So you're not going to have any real recovery from this. I mean, Manhattan is probably the largest number of office buildings that are vacant. And in this $117 billion of commercial real estate, they call it CRE, commercial real estate, there's $117 billion in office debt that needs to be repaid or refinanced in 2024. The debt is concentrated in democratic cities like New York City, Manhattan, San Francisco, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Now, what happens is when these debts cannot be refinanced, because if the office building is much more vacant than it was when the building was initially financed, and that refinancing comes due, a lot of commercial real estate pays off the previous principal on the initial loan or the initial financing at the second refinancing. But if the building has lost value because it has high unoccupied spaces, you're not going to have enough money in the refinancing to pay off the principal from the previous financing, which means a lot of regional banks have very high exposure to commercial real estate refinancing, and there's going to be a lot of credit losses over delinquent commercial real estate building loans. So we're going to have another round of bank failures. Federal Reserve may try to pour more money in to solve the problem. And since it's 2024, an election year, I suspect the Treasury and the Federal Reserve are going to be cooperating in just spending a tremendous amount of money that we don't have, just pumping it up and pouring it in. And this is going to be a long-term inflationary problem. And I don't see that the Federal Reserve is going to be able to effectively cut interest rates in 2024 without re-stimulating another rise of inflation. All of this to me means that what we were saying for last year, which is the need to diversify with some gold holdings, is happening now. All the book that is a free book, I want to focus on that. By the way, gold is today at $2,038.50 an ounce. Gold is held at over $2,000 an ounce now. I think this is the second or third week. And to get a copy of this free book, which Chris is showing you, call up Swiss America at 1-800-519-6268. 1-800-519-6268. And if you do that, you're going to find that get advice. Don't worry that somebody's going to try to sell you gold. You'll have a consultation, and it is consultative selling, trying to determine what your needs are. If you have especially retirement savings in the stock market, get some gold in your IRAs or your 401ks. It'll hold the value and increase in value when the purchasing power of your dollar is decreasing. And you don't want to be victim to a stock market collapse, which may not happen in 2024 because of the amount of money that's being poured in. That cannot sustain. So it's going to have a global crash. It's inevitable. You can't just have this modern monetary theory, which the universities have created, which is premised on the fact that we can have as much debt as we want because we're a sovereign nation and we pay off our debt with our full faith and credit of the United States government, which is not going to be worth very much if yields increase in the treasury market, because demand eventually for treasury bonds, which are used to finance the debt, to pay off the interest that's due on the debt, then if the treasury bond market in any way takes a hiccup, you're going to find that's going to create more inflation, going to have a more difficulty printing money. And this comes out of the universities, the same universities that produce, the critical race theory, the gender madness, DEI, ESG, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And these are insane ideas. We're going to cover that in a minute. But Chris, do you want to comment?
On a slightly related note, when it comes to the office vacancies, I was listening to Governor Kathy Hochul's State of the State address in New York yesterday.
Oh, great. That must have been entertaining.
Oh, it's always entertaining listening to her. She's actually blaming the mass population exodus over the years on, get this, a housing shortage.
A housing shortage.
She's saying it's not the taxes, and apparently it's not the crime, it's not the mismanagement, and it's not the other expenses when it comes to cost of living in New York. No, it's the housing shortage, which is causing mortgages and rents to rise. All right, I can understand where that's coming from. But again, that also is part of mismanagement. She's blaming it on one thing, and she's trying to make it easy. Fact is, and by the way, California is trying to push that wealth tax again, which is another thing we have to look at.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. And I see one of the New York City schools is now being closed today because they're putting 2,000 of these new arrivals in there to sleep. I guess the hotel space is all used up in New York. I mean, New York is gotten thousands of these newly arrived illegal immigrants.
That's right. And to them, the kids can learn remotely, just like during the lockdown.
Yeah, well,
that's what
maybe we should. I think we might be better off if we use the schools for the Hispanic population and let the kids stay home and be taught at home. Except it's destructive for kids. I mean, kids don't have any social interaction with their peers.
That's exactly true. They can't talk with each other. They become lonely hermits, I guess, and they're susceptible to media manipulation and whatever they listen to or hear from whatever institution is dictating things to them. It's book 101 in how to create leftists.
Yeah, I mean, it's a disaster, but it's an intended disaster.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. How to create Democrat voters. There we go.
And how to create people who hate America.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is, again, I'm encouraging people to. I'm just going to read the first paragraph of this book because I think, this sums up what's going on. I'll segue into our next story. But in this book, which is The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy, which is my second volume of the Great Awakening trilogy. The first was The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change, which is nonsense. I begin this book by saying a dark, evil ideology has descended over America. Universities across the country have indoctrinated a generation of young adults with the idea that America is a racist nation founded by slaveholders who perpetuate social injustice. This dangerous neo-Marxist generation, the first ever to rise in this land, is rapidly gaining power, pervading the federal bureaucracy, politicizing our institutions of justice, dominating our military, setting out to control the Supreme Court, and willing to steal the presidency if necessary. Trained in the techniques of critical theory, these young revolutionaries are in the process of imposing a totalitarian standard of their truths on all who dare oppose them. This is destructive. Okay, now our next story, the University of Michigan, which just won the football championship, has a remarkable number. It has created a DEI university. Let me get the story right in front of me, and I want to quote some of the details here. But the University of Michigan now has over 500 jobs that are dedicated to DEI. Now, DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, by the way, it's diversity, equity, not equality. There's a big difference there. Equality is what Martin Luther King Jr. wanted. He wanted race blindness, that there would be equal rights for everybody, and that race would not be a factor in determining outcomes. Race shouldn't be used to get admission to school or to have preference for job holding. Well, equity is exactly the opposite. Equity means that you have to advantage the disadvantaged in order to make them equal in outcomes. So therefore, it intensifies race hatred and demonizes whites as white supremacy. If you're white, you're a supremacist, whether you know it or not. And our Department of Justice has bought this nonsense. Now, the University of Michigan is growing exponentially. The number of staffers who are dedicated to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, 241 paid employees at the University of Michigan focus on DEI, and the payroll costs exceed $30 million annually. This is according to analysis conducted for the College Fix. The payroll costs are $23.24 million for salaries, $7.44 million for benefits, or $30.68 million, an amount that would cover the in-state tuition and fees for 1,781 undergraduate students. 13 DEI staff members earn more than $200,000 a year, and 66 earn more than $100,000 when factoring in benefits. In addition, there are 76 faculty or staff members that work part-time as DEI unit leads. Now, what does this mean? It means that these people are dedicated, an army are dedicated at the University of Michigan, not to providing any educational content, but they are working throughout the university to make sure that we've got enough, blacks, enough yellows, enough reds, enough this, that, and other, and races, and different people, ethnic backgrounds, enough genders. I mean, how can you possibly do this? You've got all this confusion under this critical race theory about how many genders there are. Could we have an infinite number of genders? Whatever any individual thinks their gender is, as opposed to their sex. Sex is biological, gender is how you act in sex. Okay, so therefore, all these people are doing at the University of Michigan, 500 jobs, are going around and saying, no, the mix here is wrong. This is insanity. It doesn't mean you're going to get better education. It doesn't mean you're going to get better governance of the university. It means, and by the way, the independent student newspaper in Michigan reported that campus climate surveys conducted in 2016 and 2021 found that the University of Michigan students are less happy since the beginning of DEI on nearly every metric. The survey results show that DEI 1.0 has been a failure, and it is not because of lack of resources. If the largest number of diversicrats, calling them now diversicrats, in the country cannot improve life on campus, there is something wrong at the heart of the effort. That's what is being published by the College Fix is documenting this and saying, given the track record at the University of Michigan. It is unfortunate the DEI bureaucracy is ballooning even further. Now, throughout the country, enrollment in universities is declining. And one of the key things that has happened here is that Obama made all student loans funded by the government. That's single funding. The banks used to fund student loans. And the Biden administration now wants to forgive all the student loan debt. We'll just pay for it with fake dollars. And of course, that's wildly popular among those who are holding the student debt, because the student debt is a burden for those who have graduated from universities with student debt. I mean, Chris, this is insanity. I mean, I want you to comment on this. I think it's completely insanity. And then after we cover this, we're going to move into wrapping up with a couple of really kind of shocking climate change stories. So what do you think about this university DEI effort, Chris?
This is a nationwide story. This is not just University of Michigan. The DEI departments are bloated. I call it the DEI industry. They bloat up universities' payrolls. They bloat up businesses' payrolls. Costs of goods go up. Yes, this is part of the inflation that nobody talks about. And why are people complaining about college costs these days? It's because of the DEI industry. They have bloated administrations that need to take these students' monies. And of course, when it comes to student loans being forgiven by President Biden, that means that taxpayers are technically investing in failed DEI initiatives. Let's also take this back a few more. There are manufactured DEI diploma mill courses, like your gender studies or your what was the other? Oh, any kind of PC studies, that sort of thing. They don't require any overhead. They pay these professors six figures plus. They're in these cushy offices. All they do is indoctrinate young people and do not offer them any scholarly any scholarly quality in these courses, nor do they prepare them for the real world. But what happens is colleges get the money to pay these people to indoctrinate and to pay these bloated DEI administration appendixes. Yes, I'm going to say appendixes, not arms.
Well, look, would you send a kid to the University of Michigan or Harvard or any of these? I mean, a kid is going to get simply indoctrinated.
I would try to be careful. I know. Look, let's put it this way: there are important degrees. Okay, there are. I would, if my
women's studies, black studies, Chicano
but they're not
studies.
right. I would invest in those. But if but engineering, the rest of the STEMs, we do need doctors, and a lot of these schools are very good for that. I understand that. Okay, but having to even add these useless, I'm going to say it, these useless indoctrinatory courses to a full curriculum, that takes a student, that devalues the education altogether.
Well, we don't need no stinking mathematics.
There we go. Well, we need invented math. That's what they.
We need 2 + 2 = 5 because your gender is not your sex.
Oh, damn essay writing too.
We don't need no stinking grades or no stinking. Everybody passes as long as you're DEI.
Well, Pink Floyd was way ahead on this one. We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. How about that?
Money for nothing.
That's a good one.
Dire straits, right?
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about what's going on in Germany right now. In Germany, the farmers are bringing their tractors into Berlin, and they're having a strike. They're dumping mounds of manure on the streets. Why? Well, because the ESG initiatives, the whole idea of getting the hydrocarbon fuels eliminated, and of course farmers are dangerous because they have cows and they use nitrogen fertilizers, so they're going to destroy the earth. And this insanity of climate change, which is a cult, is wanting to eliminate farms. It's a good idea. Well, so they're saying no farms, no food. Sure, no farms, no food. Closing the farms. That's a brilliant idea. Let's kill all the cattle. We can eat bugs. It's ridiculous. At any rate, Germany's three-party ruling coalition has begun to back down from a proposal to increase taxes for farmers after emotional protests. The government said it would gradually phase out the tax breaks on diesel fuel for farmers over a number of multiple years, rather than cut the benefit abruptly, as coalition leaders had initially proposed. In other words, farmers get in Germany a tax break on diesel fuel, and the hard left wanted to eliminate that. So the farmers came in and protested. So in response to these protests, where 1,700 tractors blocked the nation's main road leading to the Brandenburg Gate. This is a very wide boulevard that leads to the Brandenburg Gate at the heart of Berlin. And it just completely shut down everything in the city. The ruling coalition has not yet finalized a budget, but what they're going to have to do is take money from the offshore wind farms, which are failing because people are not investing in them. They're a boondoggle. They only exist because of government subsidies. So the last chance to balance a budget or to have any reasonable budget is going to take the money from renewable and allow the farmers to have their diesel fuel tax breaks. Now, that makes sense. Okay, hydrocarbon fuels work. Wind and solar are, a nice little idea, and you can have some wind and solar generation but the wind doesn't blow all the time, the sun doesn't shine all the time. You've got to store it in batteries. It's not effective energy. Hydrocarbon fuels, you've got them when you want them because you combust them. These are not really hard ideas. If you study the physics of energy, fuel that you have to store in a battery is not efficient. And that's the problem. You've got another stage of loss of fuel loss of energy to store energy in a battery. Okay, so again, these protests are I think, going to start happening around the world, and governments are beginning to go to the right. I see, even in the Netherlands, you've got governments going to the right. This leftist insanity has got to stop because the commercial real estate problem is exacerbated by the effort to defund the police. So you've got cities that are unsafe. People aren't going to go downtown to work in an unsafe city. There are ways to work from home still, and people are staying home and working, and they're not going downtown. So you're having office vacancies compounded by crime in the streets. And some of the statistics are shocking. 1 in every 30 motorists in Oakland has had their car stolen. I mean, these are ridiculous statistics. And the Hamas protests, which are largely university-based, have exposed the anti-American nature of the educational system. Because the union between Islam and the revolutionary hard left, which hates America and hates capitalism, hates free enterprise, has been based on the premise that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so since radical Islam wants to destroy the United States and the radical neo-Marxist cultural Maoists on the left, in other words, the Democratic Party, want to destroy America, you've got this union of the two, and now you've got the Hamas protesters blocking the Lincoln Tunnel, blocking traffic, and slowing down our cities. Our cities are just becoming unmanageable. And as those funding universities, Bill Ackman's a good case, realize the fraud in the universities, Claudine Gay, who was president of Harvard with a plagiarized dissertation. And believe me, what you're getting across, just take a look at every university and see how many in the faculty got their PhDs by doing some kind of gender study or counting up how many intersectionality. Okay, so you're first of all, you're a person of color. Well, isn't white a color? I guess not. So you're black or yellow or whatever you are, and then your sex. Your sex might be male or female, but your gender's opposite. And then maybe you come from a poor black family. Of course, Asian's not quite as disadvantaged as black. And then you're transsexual. We add up all these things and your score goes up. And so therefore you get more privileges. Because again, it's not equality, it's equity. And so therefore, if you've got all these intersectionality strikes against you because you're discriminated for all these reasons, and they add up, you get the most privileges. Insanity. I mean, it just leads to chaos. And by the way, the chaos is extending. The Iran yesterday put a warship into the Red Sea. So the Red Sea is becoming a battleground now with these little boats from the Yemen Houthi rebels who are absolutely terrorists, Islamic terrorists, blocking shipping. Maersk has abandoned the Red Sea. This is an economic disaster. And at the same time, the economic disaster in Germany is this move. Germany shut down all its nuclear power plants. Brilliant idea. At the same time, Germany's not getting any natural gas from Russia. So again, all of these leftist ideas generate destruction, negation, and they're intended to, because the radical left has gotten into its crazy mind that if they destroy the economic stability of the world, we can depopulate. And then you say, okay, well, it becomes a depopulation movement. I've proved that. I've shown you that in the 2 books I've written in this great awakening trilogy, that the entire environmental movement, starting in the 1950s, was taken over by the depopulation movement, which is Malthusian. There are too many people and the earth can't support them. And we're in that cycle right now. The last story today is the electric vehicle market is a disaster. It's a bust. And people are beginning to realize that, finally. So there's a full coverage of this today in Business Insider. And Business Insider is an influential publication. It is, by the way, the one that is going after Bill Ackman's wife, who has a university position, saying she plagiarized because Ackman was very, very prominent in getting Claudine Gay exposed as president of Harvard with a plagiarized dissertation. Now, Business Insider is writing today that the electric vehicles are, they're inevitable. We're going to have electric vehicles. Okay, well, they want Biden wanted to make electric vehicles at least half of all new cars sold by 2030. Then Congress passed then the Inflation Reduction Act, and it had a whole series of incentives for drivers to buy electric vehicles and for automakers to invest heavily in EVs. That set up all these new projects, EV plants, battery manufacturing capacities, mining operations began propping up to get the rare minerals needed to make these batteries. And so by the end of 2022, everything was being pumped. Going to be electric vehicles. It looked like a slam dunk that we were going to have an EV future, except that the sales of EVs have now hit a wall. And the EVs are piling up unsold at dealerships, and some dealers are saying they won't even take them. Some parking garages in cities, ferries are not allowing EVs to be parked or to be ferried across water in their vehicles because EVs tend to burn. They tend to spontaneously catch fire with their electric lithium batteries. So automakers have backed down on their promised investments. Ford has delayed $12 billion of its planned $50 billion investment in EV manufacturing capacity. General Motors has delayed production of key EV models, scrapped a $5 billion partnership with Honda to make cheaper EVs. Even Tesla announced that it would delay a planned factory in Mexico. You have these battery manufacturing companies failing and going bankrupt. So there's a lot of problems here from the beginning. EVs have a very, very low resale value. Nobody wants them. And what we're finding is that the standards here of what makes an EV work do produce and use a lot of carbon dioxide because they're not net zero vehicles when you take into consideration the amount of rare earth minerals that have to be mined to make the batteries. And that takes hydrocarbon fuels. All these calculations that EVs are net zero to operate exclude all the use of hydrocarbon fuels that went into creating them. Okay, and so this whole destructive mining operations, which are environmentally destructive, utilizing hydrocarbon fuels, are the real underbelly of the EV market, and a real limitation to how many can be made and how many can be serviced. So you're finding that EVs are a dead duck. Hybrids still stand a chance because the hybrids use gasoline to operate the vehicle, and the gasoline charges the batteries. Batteries do not have to be the same as a pure EV battery. Again, I think the EV market's going to die. Hybrid market, I think, will have a small percentage, but the reality is hydrocarbon fuels work. They're abundant. They are not fossil fuels. And I will put together a book in 2024 of my various writings on abiotic fuels. So I'm going to make a major effort in 2024 to get everyone to understand that this fossil fuel stuff is as much nonsense as is the climate change movement itself. Chris, any final comments before we wrap up?
I'll go with you on that. These EVs, again, and we've talked about this several times with these electric vehicles, they look nice, some of them. I mean, at least the Teslas do. And that's fine. If you want to buy them, that's fine with me. It's a free country. But what I suppose what the, let's say, elites, the ones who want to knock cars off of the roads, that sort of thing, want to eliminate diesel, gas, et cetera, want to see most of us drive those little tiny cars. Remember those first smart cars that came out? And I love the way they call them smart cars. They're not very smart if they can't make it on a long road trip, because sometimes, hey, we like to visit family, we like to go on a business trip, and yes, we have to take the kids on vacation.
Well, and one of these little tiny cars that's about big enough for one person to cram into, which are good, I guess, in a European city, won't do very well in a collision with an SUV.
That's right. Those little Mr. Bean cars, only they're electric. That's it.
The electric bicycles are burning up in New York City. I mean, these things are a disaster.
Yes, and just just go back a little more. If you don't want to ride ride a car or drive a car in New York City or anywhere else, pull out a penny farthing and start riding one of those. I'd like to see you do that.
Yeah, well, now they got all the monitors in New York now that they'll electronically watch your car and start taxing you if you're in the wrong place.
That's another thing. They're going to, or New York City is going to try to push us, finally get this driver's tax, I call it. They call it congestion pricing. I call it the driver's tax in New York City, where they've been trying to pull this up for years. COVID stopped it during the de Blasio years, and now they're trying to push this again in the name of climate change. The fact is, it's called the driver's tax because New York City needs money, and they're going to suck it out of as many people as they can.
All these democratic cities are bankrupt.
Right.
And the government's bankrupt, and we had a real accounting of it. We can't pass a budget. All we can do is a continuing resolution, just keep spending. And in the meantime, our cities are going into crime, and we've got war in the Middle East and war in the Ukraine, neither one which looks like it's going to stop. And both have the potential to expand. And Russia's definitely in a controlling position right now in the Ukraine war. And suddenly the American left has just forgotten about Ukraine. And the Biden people secured their Ukraine still remains open for money laundering. And the Department of Justice is happy with that, and the CIA, because they can run their drug money there. I mean, this whole thing is a disaster. And I think the American people are, we're seeing increasing editorials. The Victor David and Hansen's editorial the other day, which we covered, was extremely good and insightful in showing in area after area after area, the border, the World Economic Forum wanting to take control in the next pandemic so that they can have lockdowns. The whole idea of this left is this world would be a great place except for the people.
Right. I think that's what most of us think. I'm just kidding. On a serious note, though, on a serious note, watch closely. What you're saying makes a lot of sense, and watch closely how the media right now and for the last few months, and yes, in the ensuing rest of the campaign, is covering the 4 independent, non-politically established candidates who are running for president, and how they're covering the politically, let's just say, the hand-stamped by the World Economic Forum and Council on Foreign Relations types are being covered.
Yeah, well, Biden can't even answer a question, so he's going to run for president.
Exactly.
It's insane. It's insane that we're having leaders that are mentally impaired, obviously, probably senior dementia, and they're the leader of the country.
I don't think it's can't. I think it's won't.
Well,
It's won't.
No, I think it's can't.
Yeah, it's a little of both. How about that?
But the point is, well, it is a little of both. But the point is that, the Obama factions behind the scenes, a third term for Obama, which is, everybody with Jeffrey Epstein gets a pass. Everybody with J6 gets a pass that was on the government side. They all get a pass. What I recommend you do is get a copy of this. The coming global crash will create a historic gold rush. Call toll free 800-519-6268. Take a look at our sponsors. My Vital C, people saying I'm looking younger. I'm 77 years old and working more now than I probably have ever in my life. This miracle molecule, carbon 60, I do recommend you take a look at it. And we have opened up, I'm selling from my stock of authors' books. I'm selling signed copies of several books. If you go to that section, you can see them on the internet. If you like the program, please support our sponsors. Buy some books. I want to liquidate some of these inventories, and when they're gone, they'll be the last that I have. You'll have some signed editions that should appreciate in value. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. This is a dark period of time, dystopian period of time, because the left has finally gotten its insane neo-Marxist, cultural Maoist, and anarchist narrative accepted by the mainstream media and pervading all the institutions of the United States, including the universities. It will end because it doesn't work. It just ends up in chaos and disaster, and the American people will be tired of it and sick of it. When you can't feed your family, who's going to care what gender somebody is? They can worry about that in their own time. Feeding the family will take precedence. Of course, though, we've destroyed families. So, we have our cities now being increasingly fentanyl-filled, homeless refuge camps. This is insanity. And it will pass, but we'll have the judgment of God. And it will not be pretty. You cannot have, in 2 Chronicles 7:14, we need to get on our knees and ask God's forgiveness. We took God out of the schools going back to the 40s. We killed millions of babies in the womb by cutting them up by these murderous abortionists. We have not protected the life of a fetus, and we violated God's law. But I don't believe God created the human race to fail. I think in the end, we will have the restoration of God's rule over earth. And these demons will be locked up again and sent back to hell where they belong. Dr. Jerome Corsi, today is Wednesday, January 10th, 2024. We're doing podcasts every weekday on thetruthcentral.com. Thank you for joining us. God bless.